Doug! Doug, did you know that today is the anniversary of the passing of Prohibition in 1917?
Hell yeah, I'll drink to that.
Some people will tell you to play it safe. We're here to tell you to go all out. Welcome to the All Out Blitz. I'm your host, JJ Wenne, and I am joined by the tipsy toddler himself, Doug Orth. Tonight on the show, Doug is going to share his insight he has gained from watching the film and diving into the analytics from week 15. So let's jump right into this, Doug. There was a lot of discourse this preseason surrounding the Falcons on draft day. They used a first on a rookie QB after spending a ton of money on Kirk Cousins in the offseason. And I guess we're going to find out if that was a wise decision. So, Doug, what should we look forward to with Michaelpenix Jr.?
Yeah, my fantasy points column, which dropped Wednesday morning as it usually does, typically highlights players who enjoyed a breakout performance in their last game and digs deep to find out the why and the how using film analytics. Now, Penix is going to be a little bit of a departure from that in that he last played a month ago and has logged only 20 offensive snaps in the NFL, all in garbage time. As you already alluded to, late Tuesday night, Falcons announced Penix, the number 8 overall pick in this year's draft, and the source of many, what was Atlanta thinking conversations, to put it nicely, over the last 7+ months, that he would take over for Kirk Cousins as the starting quarterback moving forward. I think we have to say it's a long overdue move, considering Captain Kirk looked like his pre-injury self in, 3 games this year? He had an 11-to-1 touchdown ratio in 3 games, 2 against the Bucs, 1 against Cowboys. Against everyone else, that was 10 to 15. Okay, so it's going to be pointless for me to dissect how Penix has performed analytically on his 5 NFL pass attempts. Okay,
Didn't see a lot in those 5 attempts, Doug.
Oh man, he the quick read on the 5-yard hook. So, but I think we can look at the kind of prospect he was during his time at the University of Washington. He obviously transferred from Indiana first to Washington, and then that's where he made his name. And then look at some of the college film, or at least discuss some of the college film, which I do in the article, that made him attractive to the Falcons. In turn, we can probably make a case, maybe a week 1, but we can make a case for him being viable in fantasy right away. Although I believe his biggest contribution this year will be likely what he does for his key playmakers, most notably Drake London and Darnell Mooney. Apparently, this is no longer a Kyle Pitts show, so we'll just stick with those first 2.
Please.
In Penix's draft profile this spring, he was the Heisman Trophy runner-up last year. I gave him a high-end comp to Jordan Love, low-end comp to Geno Smith, for what it's worth. Among his most attractive qualities, again, talking about Penix here, I noted he was likely the best deep ball thrower in this draft class. And that's not for nothing here. We're talking about a draft class with Drake May, Jalen Daniels, Caleb Williams. Best deep ball thrower in the class. Possessed exceptional accuracy and quick decision making. And this is something I know we talked about during our draft show, our NFL draft shows. Early May? He took 31 sacks on 1,759 career dropbacks. I don't know if he even got sacked 10 times last year at Washington. Maybe it was 12 or 13 after the national championship game, but you get the point. Mm-hmm. His biggest dropbacks were his age, 24 years old. He turned that, I think, this summer. And extensive injury history. There was at least 2 torn ACLs that ended 2 of his 4 years in Indiana. Anyhow, make no mistake, Penix's promotion is huge for Mooney, given his ability to stretch the field. However, it should be noted that London could be unlocked as well, since he has largely been underutilized as a vertical receiver over his 3-year NFL career. We do this with some other guys. We did it with McLaurin, I believe, in our summer shows, but here, this is what Drake London has dealt with for 3 years. Post Achilles version of Cousins, Desmond Ridder, Marcus Mariota, and Taylor Heineke. Again, remind me how many of those guys are starting in the league now. Yeah.
0.
So I know this is going to be a huge, this is wish casting, I think is what the kids call it now. If Penix can make a seamless transition to the pro game and remains a proficient deep ball passer, we may have only seen a hint of the upside London possesses. And why do I say that? Because London on his college film, to me, was not much of a separator. I think he's gotten a lot better at separating at the pro level. I didn't see that at USC. What he did do really well in college was contested catches down the field. So now if we have a quarterback who can chuck it, and Penix definitely showed that he could chuck it, and he was willing to chuck it last year, then, like I said, we might be unlocking Drake London. So this was more of a summation and introducing folks to Penix who may not be overly familiar with him. But what are your thoughts on what Penix brings, and then maybe what his upside is?
I mean, when it comes to what happened in the offseason, I liked what the Falcons did. You, as a team, as a fan of a team that can't find a quarterback, and every year I hear people talk about, we'll just get one in free agency. I know how difficult it is to find a viable starting quarterback. Like, there's not a lot of them, and especially if you have a bad offense, but I'm not talking, it's not a Jets show right now. So it's just hard to find them.
Yeah.
So when they drafted Penix, I was like, I understand why some people were upset, but I thought it made sense. Because they weren't going to go through what they've just gone through again. Like, they weren't going to suffer. If Cousins didn't work out, they had somebody on the back. And if Cousins did work out for a year, they had his backup ready to go when he was ready to move on. Even if Penix doesn't work out, I still think it was the right decision. Now, am I excited to see what he can do? Sure, because we were all excited before this season for what Cousins was going to unlock on this team.
Yeah.
Now, Pitts has fizzled yet again. Mooney just put up a goose egg. You and I were talking about the show, how much that affected us. So I understand why they're making this decision. I think Penix can do something. I mean, I know he has an injury history. Hopefully he puts that behind him. I mean, Stafford had a pretty extensive injury history early in his career, and he kind of showed that, you can leave that in the past and move forward. So I'm looking forward to what Penix can do, but I don't know how much I would trust him in the playoffs, Doug. Playoffs? So what does this mean? How are you going to use him in the playoffs?
Yeah, I think I can sum this up in 100 words less. I'm not going to attempt to make a spirited argument in favor of starting Penix outside of 2 quarterback or superflex leagues in Week 16. But I do think the Falcons are doing him a favor by allowing him to make his first career start against the Giants. Atlanta does not have the luxury of time as it tries to catch the Bucs in the NFC South. So my expectation would be that offensive coordinator Zach Robinson is going to do everything in his power to quickly, and I emphasize quickly, build up Penix's confidence and his level of comfort quickly. Just to emphasize the quickly part. Considering how bad Cousins has been over the last month, the Falcons' passing game has nowhere to go but up. And I think that's the key point there. Anyone who was reliant on the Falcons' passing game this past week, okay, if you were the Drake London manager, okay, you were, what'd you get, 14 points? Okay, that's manageable. It's not going to win me my league. It's not going to win me my matchup. It's not going to lose me my matchup, more than likely. But we've going back to those Bucs games. I know that's the exception on the other end. It was about a month ago that, man, Darnell Mooney is the key to winning a lot of fantasy titles here. I mean, the guy that you're picking up off waivers or you drafted as your wide receiver 5 or 6, he's now a top 20 receiver. It's not that Cousins wasn't good for the offense on some level. He was better than the other three quarterbacks I mentioned by leaps and bounds. The post injury version of him,
Right.
But you're trying to win you're trying to win a winnable division, and you've got a quarterback who is what was it, 1 touchdown versus 9 interceptions over the last 5 weeks. I don't know, and I'm sure he'll be better next year. I just don't think next year will be in Atlanta. So,
well, the thing with backup quarterbacks, right? It's like they're always like Schrodinger's cat, right?
mm-hmm.
Like they're sitting there on the bench. They could be amazing or they could be terrible. And you don't know until you put them in the game, right?
Yeah.
So everybody loves the backup QB until they take their first snap. And then it's going to quickly sort itself out, Doug.
Yeah, you're right.
Which way do you think it's going to break?
Well, I think they'll probably go I was briefly looking at their schedule earlier on this year. I think they'll go 2-1 over their final 3 games. I had somebody on Twitter, and I'm not directly answering your question. I had somebody on Twitter ask me right before the show, Anthony Richardson or Penix this week, and I think that's about it. I mean, Richardson's rushing floor, and I told him Richardson given the rushing floor, but I think expectations this week, I'd be thrilled if he goes for 180 and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. 2 touchdowns would be huge.
Yeah. I don't expect
180. We call that an Aaron Rodgers.
They showed last week that they're going to rely on the running game, and I think they'll continue to rely on the running game until they are forced to air it out. And I think they have Washington next week. That's a team that could force them to get out of their comfort zone a little bit. But I think right now is as much about getting his feet wet. They're going to prepare for next season. They're preparing for next season with this and I guess introducing him during the playoff stretch, I guess, is the best way to see what you have fairly quickly. But I don't expect it to go well. I don't expect them to win the division now. I think they've given up too far. Tampa Bay is playing too well, and they've given up the lead that they had and they just don't have enough time to turn things around. But if you're asking me, Penix is probably QB 22 over these next 2 or 3 weeks, somewhere in that neighborhood.
All right. Well, I am interested in talking about the next player, but before we do, let's give our hosts a little bit of love. Finish your season strong with IDP Plus. Visit idpplus.com, and for a limited time, which has been the entire season, get 20% off any subscription with the promo code PROPS. We are so much more than just IDP, Doug. Get access to our tools, data, and articles, and don't miss out on our subscriber Discord. So go to IDP Plus and start your march towards fantasy glory today. All right, Doug. It is time to pour one out for the great running back Nick Chubb, who has once again out for the season after breaking his foot. Jerome Ford is set to take over the backfield, but should we be confident in him, sir?
Given the theme of the show, did you say pour one out? Because I'm ready to pour another one out.
You better be careful.
Yeah. You said it already. Fantasy managers have become all too accustomed to life without Nick Chubb. As you touched on, he'll miss the remainder of the season with his broken left foot. For the 3rd time in the last 2 years, Ford will take over for an extended period of time as the team's lead back. So I thought it would be helpful in the article to briefly look at what he did with his first 2 opportunities. From weeks 3 through 17 last year, and that was beginning the game after Chubb suffered his gruesome right knee injury against Pittsburgh on Monday night and back in week 2 last year, Ford was the 14th highest scoring running back in fantasy. With Chubb unable to start this season while recovering from the multiple surgeries on the same knee, Ford was the overall RB30 in weeks 1 through 6, albeit in a much different offense. And I think for the context of what we're talking about here, that's where we need to set the expectation. But allow me to continue. For one reason or another, the Browns have almost refused to feature Ford when Chubb has missed extended time. Only once in his 3 NFL seasons has Ford handled at least 20 touches in a game. He's been trusted with 15 or more touches just 9 times, with only 2 of those outings coming in 2024. Now, the funny thing about his usage is that his analytics support the notion he should get more work, especially considering how bad the Browns' offensive line has been this year. Before Chubb's Week 7 return, Ford was I have three good ones here for you, JJ. Ford was 10th among running backs. This is with a minimum of 50 carries in yards per carry, 5.3. Again, 5.3 yards per carry behind a line that a post-injury Chubb was getting, 3.3? Just keep that in mind. 11th in yards after contact per attempt, 2.9, and 15th in explosive run rate, and that was at 6%. We saw his explosiveness last week against the Chiefs. He went pretty much untouched on that 62-yard touchdown. And that's the longest run by any Brown since Ford's 69-yard touchdown run about midway through last season. One of the few areas Ford fell short analytically over the first 6 weeks of the season was forcing only 6 mixed tackles. Although it should be noted, for as much love as Devon Achane gets, that's where Achane was 6 forced missed tackles through 6 weeks. So, maybe not that bad, but I went more with the 31st in the metric as opposed to who he was tied with. Okay. As was the case last season, a sizable chunk of Ford's fantasy value during the first 6 games came because of his receiving ability, ranking 7th among running backs with 20 catches in that span. The problem with all that work, JJ, was that he was averaging 4.4 yards per catch, making him probably, I don't remember the last time I saw this. I know it's happened before, but it makes him one of the few running backs with a higher yards per carry average than a yards per catch average over an extended stretch of time. You know and love Jerome Ford. What do you think about Jerome Ford?
I know and love him.
Yes, you do.
I've had to start Jerome Ford on and off with injuries and bye weeks and just terrible decision making on my part. I like Jerome Ford. I like his explosiveness. I like what I see when he's in the game. But much like you said, he never gets a full complement. He never gets a full workload. So we're kind of left just wondering what could be if he gets more, right? He has explosive runs, but he doesn't get enough carries to have those explosive runs happen more often. So what's going to happen down the stretch? Now, Jameis Winston is out. DTR is in. I don't understand how you make that decision. Like, I get the fact that Jameis Winston is throwing too many interceptions. But what do you think DTR is going to do? Right? I mean, it's not like he's a highly efficient, good quarterback. So if you're going from Winston down to DTR, and now you're putting Ford in, I guess Ford might get a lot of carries. Or not. I don't know. What do you see in fantasy?
The range of outcomes here, I think, is huge, but in a bad offense, right?
Well, the problem before there was like a floor for him, right? Like RB 36.
Yeah.
Like it was a low floor, but there was a floor. Now I feel like there's no floor.
My thoughts on Ford are this, and they're going to run. They're pretty much going to agree with you down the line. I think Browns have been one of the league's worst rushing teams all season. So Ford's big fantasy day in Week 15. Let's call it what it was. Ford had a big game in Week 15 because he had a 62-yard touchdown run. Otherwise, he doesn't have a huge day. So I think we need to treat that Week 15 performance for the aberration it likely was. You mentioned DTR. His insertion into the lineup is probably going to increase the rushing floor for the team, but there's no way it's going to reduce the overall upside of the offense. I don't know how it couldn't. And this is coming from somebody who I thought was DTR. I thought DTR was a good developmental prospect, somebody who could year 3, year 4 become a low end starting quarterback in the league. Man, I am not seeing it. I have not seen it through. I think this is 2 years now. I'm not seeing it. So, in a sense, Ford may benefit from DTR checking down more often than Jameis Winston did in his run as a starter. But it's hard for me to imagine Ford being anything more than a serviceable flex, and I'm stretching it by saying serviceable flex. But serviceable flex option over the remainder of fantasy playoffs. And I'll add one other thing, too. I keep mentioning, it seems like the last 3 or 4 weeks, I keep mentioning the Kings Classic League. The one I'm still in, number 2 seed overall. Ford is probably, I actually don't know why I kept Ford on that team other than I just knew how precious any running back depth was in that league, or a 14-team league with 3 flexes. I think he's my RB5. And I'm questioning with 3 flex spots, 2 running back spots and 3 flex spots, if I should make him a starter over Josh Downs or somebody like that. You hit it. I think the floor is 20 yards total, and I think the ceiling is something like he breaks off another long run and we get 15 points. So if you're happy with that kind of volatility in your flex spot, go for it. Otherwise, don't come back to us and say that we recommended it, because we didn't.
Yeah, man. Like, even the upside though isn't there. Like, I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Lines beat up. The lines beat up. Now, and this is getting off track a little bit. Just what you said. How do you make that decision going to DTR? Now with over Winston, now you're sinking Jerry Jeudy. If you were counting on Jerry Jeudy, thanks for playing. 5 catches, 50 yards. Is that his ceiling now? Right?
Unless he gets 15 targets. Like, I don't know.
Elijah Moore is pretty much off. And Joku may be low end tight end 1 now. He was very much a candidate to be tight end 1 during the fantasy playoffs, obviously before he missed last week, but if you would have kept Winston through those 3 weeks, you could have strongly made. You could say I would prefer. I prefer him over Brock Bowers. That kind of thing, right? We're just not there. I think Cleveland's going to be close to unwatchable now for the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Well, HBO hopes not, because they are on Hard Knocks, so I hope they get a little bit of interest. But sticking in the same division, and speaking of Hard Knocks, Doug, I love Lamar Jackson. I really do. I love the Baltimore Ravens. I think they're a great organization that is run by professionals. Up and down their staff, they are professional coaches. Something that you cannot say for all the teams in the NFL. However, being the wide receiver 2 on the Ravens has never been a good position for fantasy. So will Rashad Bateman break that streak, Doug? What have you seen on the film?
Throughout his 4-year NFL career, and even at various points during his breakout campaign this year, the mere mention of Bateman's name would typically elicit an eye roll. In fact, I feel like an eye roll right now, even though he's having a good year. It did not matter to his critics that he could not buy a break with injuries or was underutilized in a run-based offense. Regardless of the reason, the detractors would be quick to mention that first-round picks first-round picks at receiver need to do more than average 31 catches for 389 yards and 1.3 touchdowns over the first 3 NFL seasons. Now, the problem with being down on Bateman was that he was really never bad at football, especially last year when most of his remaining supporters finally threw in the towel. And I get it. I mean, dynasty, redraft, or whatever, how many times are you going to go down that well? Hey, I love Bateman in Minnesota. There's no way I'm wrong about him. 1 time, 2 times. Dude, anyway. So hopefully you got the tweet. Do you have the tweet ready for us here? No, that's fine. Well, before the start of the season, the Fantasy Points data suite, the Twitter account, posted posted a tweet, obviously, and Bateman was number 3 on that list in average separation score, 0.231. He was on the same list. Tank Dell was number 1, Deontay Johnson was number 2, Bateman number 3, Ayuk 4, Mike Evans 5. Now, I think part of that tweet was also to highlight that Quentin Johnson was last, but that's I think it's funny because how things change over the course of the year. So anyway, I want you to remember the 0.231 average separation score from last year. Now, Bateman's average separation score this year is not quite on the level it was last season, but his 0.171, as we call it at fantasy points, his ass is in 2024 ranks 4th among receivers who have run at least 200 routes. Now, if we increase that benchmark to 300 routes, he ranks 1st among all receivers, just ahead of Zay Flowers at 0.164. So you have to ask yourself, okay, how can 2 receivers from the same team, albeit a Baltimore's offense, how can they lead the league, all receivers, average separation score? Well, to me, that would point to Todd Monk and his ability to get guys open, the offense coordinator, obviously, his ability to get guys open and the amount of attention that Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry attract. But I don't think these things in football are rarely ever mutually exclusive, right? It's not because Lamar Jackson is great that everything around him is great. The supporting cast plays a role in that too. And so, as I said in the column, his average separation score, or the fact that Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson attract so much attention, it should not take away from the fact that Bateman is actually good, hashtag good at football. Now, we saw a couple examples actually, but one in particular. We saw he was known for his route running abilities at Minnesota in early on too, and that great route running abilities is how you get an average separation score that high. We saw an example of that last week when he ran I believe it was a post corner, and basically turned safety Jason Pennock. Pennock I think he was faced toward the goalpost, and Bateman is probably about 10 yards the other way, catches a fly ball, jukes his way into the end zone. You don't get that open unless you're selling your routes pretty well. That was a 49-yard touchdown early in the second quarter. Later in the second quarter, he beat another safety, I believe it was on a post route, for a 20-yard touchdown. Now, I didn't mention this in the column, but it should not be lost on anyone that he beat safeties both times. Although I think that goes right back to Monken doing a good job of creating a favorable matchup for his receivers. Do you have any additional thoughts on Bateman before we wrap on him?
I mean, just again, I think since Lamar took over full time in 2019, the wide receiver 2 on the team averages 60 targets, right? A low of 46 up to a high of 75, right? It's not a lot.
No.
Right now, Bateman's sitting at 60 with a couple games left. So he has clearly outperformed, at least in earning targets, every other wide receiver 2 that Lamar has had. So does that mean something good for fantasy? I think so down the stretch. I think Lamar has a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. I think all of this, Josh Allen is running away with the MVP, it's kind of nonsense. I think Lamar is right in that race, and I think Lamar cares about stuff like that. He wants to win, but, I think Lamar takes a little bit of abuse from people for being a running quarterback.
Yeah.
And he's more than that. And I think he has shown it repeatedly, and people still don't listen. So I think that's going to affect Bateman down the stretch. I just don't know how much I would rely on him as one of my starting 3 wide receivers, but I would definitely flex Bateman. I mean, depending on what else. What do you think that means for fantasy?
I think you nailed it. I think on a team that was in negative game scripts more often, touched 40 pass attempts more often, we would see a high end wide receiver 3, I think, at worst. But we got a team with Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely, Zay Flowers. Oh, by the way, we need to get 30 rush attempts for our quarterback and running back. Before you know it, you're at 50 plays or 55 plays.
Yeah.
And by that time, you've usually got a 10-point lead, and then we don't need to use Bateman. So my thoughts in the column were this, and they're going to go pretty much word for word, line for line with you. As the overall wide receiver 36, which was a little bit of a surprise to me, as the overall wide receiver 36 with 38 catches for 654 yards and 7 touchdowns right now, Bateman is still not technically setting the world on fire. Then again, as you alluded to, inconsistency is often part of the deal when a wideout is averaging 4 targets with an ADOT of 15.9. Now, we've discussed this before where 15.9, 16 is probably the limit of what you want your regular starters at receiver, because when you get much past 16, you're getting into highly uncertain territory. I mean, you have to be an elite. You have to have an elite catch rate with a huge ADOT in order to be consistent.
Right.
As I just mentioned, 4 targets a game. You catch 1, it better end up in the end zone, or you're a dud. If you catch 2, they better both be long plays. So, and these deep throws are what, 30%, accuracy at roughly, I think. So again, as you alluded to, Bateman's production is far too volatile to be considered a strong wide receiver 3 option, especially in Week 16 against the Steelers. However, and I think this is the best part about what we're talking about here with Bateman, he has delivered enough boom weeks this year to shed the bust label that I think a lot of people had placed on him after 3 straight disappointing seasons. So he would be someone, as you said, if I need a high upside flex, then I don't hesitate there. I don't want him in my wide receiver 3 spot these final 2 weeks, though.
Couldn't agree more, Doug. But you do know it's football season, right? And that means a trip to see your favorite team on the road. Well, with Expedia, you get the best prices when traveling, and we are thrilled for our partnership with Expedia. Do you need a flight to Atlanta, rent a car in Cleveland, or a hotel in Baltimore to see our friend Rashad Bateman? Well, go to idpplus.com/Expedia and build the best package to travel to the big game. Doug, every week I like to sing a little bit, but people are strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly when you're alone. No Doors fans. Well, Mr. Strange, or is he a doctor? Dr. Strange?
Dr. Strange, yeah.
Dr. Strange has stepped into Evan Ingram's role with the Jags. But will people remember his name when you're strange? Doug, what do you think? Are people going to remember Brenton Strange next week?
Well, let me start you off with something I didn't include in the article, because I want to start dropping tidbits that for pod viewers that you don't get in the article.
Oh, exclusive content. Yeah. Doug, thanks for dusting this off in week 15, you mother.
Hey, I bring it in the fantasy playoffs, yo.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, more than anything, this is dry material, but we're going to do it anyway. I wanted to give some perspective on Dr. Strange's surprising 11-catch, 73-yard day in Week 15. According to Pro Football Reference, there have been 96 instances of a tight end catching 11 passes in a game in league history. Does that surprise you? 11?
That's it?
Yeah, 96 instances.
Okay.
Now, Strange became only the 47th tight end to ever accomplish it. So about each, you're averaging.
Really?
Yeah, that was a little bit surprising to me too. You had guys like Tony Gonzalez, I think was 6 times, and Rob Gronkowski, I think, was only once. it was some of the names and the frequency was very odd as I was going through that. His 73 yards receiving was the second lowest total of the 96 instances. And then now that's the end of the Pro Football Reference part, and this is just good research on my part. The Barry Horowitz backs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this last part, and this Jaguars had 10 drives in Week 15. Strange saw at least one target on 9 of them, and I wanted to point that out because this was not a performance that. Okay, yeah, he loaded up with targets. He had 8 targets on the final 2 drives, or he was involved regularly throughout the game, was the point. Strange undoubtedly benefited from the fact that Mac Jones did not push the ball down the field much against the Jets. Congratulations to Jets, by the way.
4 and 10. 4 and 10. Not to interrupt, but one of my students, Juju is his nickname, he's a Jets fan, so every time we see each other, we usually hide our eyes. This week, we high-fived, and every time we've seen each other since, we chant 4 and 10, 4 and 10, because we are so excited. But go on. I'm sorry. Brenton Strange, Jags. Sorry we beat you.
So we were talking about Mac Jones before I was rudely interrupted. Oh, hello.
Yeah, let's try this out for the end.
Mac Jones' 8.7% deep throw rate in Week 15 was the 9th lowest among quarterbacks who started last week. Jones also attempted 15 more passes in Week 15 than he has in any other game this season. Let's take that one step further. Jones attempted 8 more passes than Trevor Lawrence did in any game this year.
Well, if you have a weapon like Mac Jones on the field, of course you're going to unleash him.
McCorkle. You unleash McCorkle at any opportunity, especially against the great pass.
Would you uncork McCorkle?
Oh, you know what? I was looking for a reason to bring the uncork. There we go.
Put that down. Stop it. No drinking on the job.
Okay. On one hand, logic suggests that Strange took advantage of some soft coverage and just had a career game. Both things might very well be true. On the other hand, the tight end's position has been targeted 28.2% of the time in Jacksonville this year, between Evan Ingram and Strange, and I think they have Josiah DeGuara, and I want to say Luke Farrell was the other guy that I saw. I'm surprised. I pulled that from memory. Ugh. The alcohol is good for me.
Oh, Lord. I have to zoom out. I think that this much attention is going to your head.
Here's the thing, though, and we'll talk about why I think it's possible that this is quite fantasy relevant here in a minute. Jones and Strange are almost perfectly suited for each other because the former, being Jones, is not much of a threat to throw deep, and the latter, being Strange, is unlikely to stretch the field. If you watched him at all last week, you know he was not stretching the field. I don't think he got past 10 yards on any of his routes. That's not what he's going to do. Perhaps the thing I was most encouraged by as I was preparing for this article was in Week 15, the Fantasy Points data suite has a metric called first read and design target rate. Strange was the first read on 35.3% of dropbacks. Not bad for a backup or a tight end in that offense. With Brian Thomas Jr. likely to draw even more attention now than he did before after 10 catches, 105 yards, and 2 touchdowns last week, Jones may be incentivized to throw short and over the middle even more than usual. To that end, Strange's 4.3 ADOT was the 8th lowest mark of any pass catcher who ran at least 20 routes in Week 15. That just goes to again show you and tell you he wasn't pushing, he wasn't stretching the seam by. I don't think I saw him run one downfield route. He may have. I don't think I saw it though. I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier. There's one other key piece to the puzzle that has not been discussed yet, and the major reason behind Strange's huge day was. The reason it was possible is because Evan Ingram was ruled out for the season earlier in the week with a shoulder injury. Now, I'm not here to tell you that Strange is going to pick up all the volume that Ingram left behind. I'm not going to tell you that he's going to repeat last week. No, I think 11 catches will end up being his career high. But he may not pick up all of Ingram's volume, but he's a good bet to absorb a large percentage of it. Also, don't lose sight of the fact that Strange was playing roughly 40% of the offensive snaps even when Ingram was healthy. And the other thing to keep in mind, outside of perhaps Parker Washington, the Jaguars have no other short area target that has earned trust from Jones. So, yeah, I think I'll wrap it up here. Did you get to see Strange at all? Dr. Strangelove, did you get to see that? Did you get to enjoy any of this?
Listen, much like Dr. Strangelove, if he keeps putting up 11 catches, you're going to ride him like the nuclear bomb, right? Yeehaw! No, listen. Like you said, he's been playing a lot of snaps. It's not like he hasn't. Is he going to step into a role that's vacant? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They're going against Las Vegas. Las Vegas is terrible against tight ends. I would feel comfortable starting him this week. I mean, sure, he might get 8 catches for 40 yards, but that's still 12 points out of your tight end. And if it's tight end premium, that's even better. So I don't know long-term success if we're going to see anything out of this, but if you need somebody this week, I'd feel comfortable putting him in there. Yeah. What about you?
It's always going to be risky to put faith in a player who's not proved himself yet. But there is also a case to be made that he already kind of did prove himself when Ingram missed the 4 games. Was it weeks 2 through 5, something like that. During that stretch, Ingram was out with a hamstring injury at that point. Strange had 12 catches for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. Again, we're pointing back to the fact the guy does not stretch the field. He is a short-range target only. Now, the difference between then and now is he has strong-armed Trevor Lawrence, and a mostly healthy receiving core to contend for targets with. They no longer have Lawrence. They lost Christian Kirk. They lost, go ahead and laugh, Gabe Davis. Brian Dunn. What's that?
I won't laugh.
You won't laugh? Okay. Well, because I remember Gabe Davis was going to be an every level receiver this year. They were going to work him into being more than just a deep threat, But again, the point being, Jaguars don't have Trevor Lawrence anymore, and they certainly don't have a healthy receiving core anymore. If there's one fantasy position where it's okay to bet on potential upside as opposed to having a long record or a long track record of results to kind of fall back on, it's going to be tight end. I mentioned this in the article. Strange may not be Brock Bowers, but he is a great fit for his current quarterback in an offense that will likely be in negative game scripts for the rest of the season. My estimation, it should surprise no one if he is a top 12 option at tight end over the last 2 weeks of the fantasy playoffs. And I think that's just going to be strictly volume. If he falls into the end zone once, great. I'm not going to predict 10 targets for him this week, but I don't project that stuff during the season anyway. But if you said 8 catches, 40 yards, I'll go. I don't know. I'll go like 7 for 60. I think that's but we're talking about the same kind of range in PPR points here. And this is the question they have to ask. This is the question I'm going to be asking myself as I'm setting waivers tonight and making starting lineup decisions. Are you starting Strange over Hunter Henry?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so.
Now, so we're already then looking at probably tight end 10 there. I mean, because I think Henry's a top 10 tight end this year already, and he has the quarterback and all that good stuff. Are you starting him if we find out Mahomes doesn't play for some reason? Are you starting him over Travis Kelce?
No.
Okay. But my point being is, and we could play this game for a few more minutes, but my point being is that it's going to be very difficult. Yes, go ahead.
No, I'm thinking about no, it is tight, right? Like you get into that range and you're just hoping for somebody who's going to get enough action.
Okay, well, yeah. Let's do a couple more examples that I was just thinking of. Njoku with DTR.
Oh God, hell no! I trust Mac Jones much more than DTR.
So you would go with Strange over Njoku.
Oh God, damn it! Only because they have DTR. I don't know if he's going to complete a pass.
And that's the point, and that's really the point here.
Like, and it's frustrating because if you're asking me like who is the better player, like there is no doubt the answer to these questions.
Yes.
The answers wouldn't have been strange for any of those questions.
Yes.
But it's like, I mean, DTR might go like 8 of 16 for 90 yards.
You're right.
And 2 interceptions. Like, I don't know.
And
I just have a hard time trusting. I have a hard time trusting DTR.
I know the fantasy playoffs. We were talking about this before the show. You know, a large part of getting through the season, regular season, is skill, and then when you get to the fantasy playoffs, it's a lot about luck. And there's nothing that's going to prepare us each year to come to the conclusion in week 15, week 16. Oh, by the way, you were gifted. You picked up Njoku off waivers. I did that in a couple of my high stakes leagues. I was shocked that he was available, and I'm glad that he was. Okay, I already had Mark Andrews in one, and I probably had Tucker Kraft in the other. Okay, my point being though is, someone tells you shortly after your draft, okay, you're going to come to a point down. You're going to make the fantasy playoffs, so congratulations. Oh, by the way, Njoku, who's been a threat to be the overall tight end 1 with Winston available. Okay, now you're gonna have to legitimately consider whether or not you're gonna bench him for the Jags backup tight end. Go. That's the amount of mind-numbing and mind-bending decisions that you have to make in the fantasy playoffs. And that's another thing that we talked about off the show, before the telecast. Anybody who wrapped up a number one or number 2 seed in their league should not have to be deciding between Ty Johnson and Amir Abdullah as their RB2. It just shouldn't happen. But
and here we are.
Here we are. That's right. So folks, we're sorry about bringing this show to such a sobering end, but these are decisions that we have just like you. So anyway, please wrap us up and get us out of here before I cry in my southern.
Oh no. Okay, we'll get this going. It is time to say goodbye. Let people know where they can find us and any final thoughts. Doug.
I'm still at Twitter. Still haven't made the transition to Blue Sky yet. Go ahead and send your negative comments to me now. So still at Doug Orth, just like it has been since we started the show. The Fantasy Points article dropped earlier this morning, as I noted. So please give that a read. For my FF Today piece, I will be doing week 2 of Q&A for the fantasy playoffs. We'll talk about start-sit decisions and any guys that may have slipped through waivers, but it's not going to hit until Friday morning, Friday afternoon. So we're not going to be able to do like a waivers discussion or anything like that. So we'll do week 2 of Q&A there. And the last thing I'll mention too is as I mentioned last week, I'll be a co-host with Eric Waltman on the High Stakes Fantasy Hour tomorrow night. So please check us out there starting at 7:00.
All right. I'm at JJ Wenner on Blue Sky. Also on X. You can find me there as well. I'm just not there ever anymore. Thank you for taking the time to watch and listen to our work. We hope you're able to learn something about the game, and hopefully we shared a laugh or two together this season. It was 2 years ago when I first told Doug that he should have a podcast, and I offered to help him in any way I could. It's been a journey to get to here, and I can't thank Doug enough for all of his hard work. I have learned a lot this year, and I look forward to learning a lot more as we continue to improve our work. We would like to thank everyone who has made our first season successful, from Grant to Brittany to Gary, who worked hard this year on our thumbnails, publishing our content, helping us to try to find our audience. Your work is appreciated. To Ricky, Nate, and the rest of the crew over at IDP Plus, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for your hospitality this year. We are going to be taking a break, but we will be back in the spring to start covering free agency. So please follow us on X and Blue Sky to get updates to where you can find the pod when we return. You can catch me tomorrow night on the Rider Dynasty podcast. We're going live at 6 p.m. Eastern with Jameson Hutchinson and Joe Harlow. And remember, when in doubt, go all out. Boat drinks, my friends. Boat drinks.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.